The Black Forest smells like Christmas, even when it's February, and even when it's midnight, and the pine needles have gone black in the window glass, turning the room into a diorama of your own furniture. Out past Colorado Springs proper, where the roads buckle into shadow and the houses sit back from the lanes like they're shy, you learn the shapes of your own noises. The fridge hiccup that happens when the compressor dies. The jolt the heater makes when half the county decides to breathe at the same time. The wind fingering the screens. I was house-sitting for the Myers. 2 Malamutes, 1 dying philodendron, a stack of junk mail that looked heavier than it was. They had left for a ski weekend, and I had said yes because the dogs were gentle and because my own apartment off Academy smelled like my neighbor's cigarettes and someone's oil-stained laundry. You don't say no to a 3-day campout in a big, quiet house with a wood stove and a pantry full of soups you don't have to buy. By 11, the wind had decided the county line was a zipper to worry. It plucked at the edge of the kitchen window screen until it found the note it liked. The Malamutes, Sable and Duke, watched me with polite worry from the doorway while I washed 2 bowls, wiped the counter, counted the number of tiles from sink to back door. It was one of those small, careful nights where you talk softer to yourself than you need to, like loud thoughts could make the house take sides. The first wrong thing was the smell. Not cigarette, not aftershave. Clean in the way hospital corridors are. Sharp, citrus, and underneath it, something like cold iron. It was faint. Then not. I turned toward the mudroom and saw the shape of a man written in negative space, like the room had misplaced a shadow and then remembered. He didn't rush. He didn't bluster. He stepped into the frame of the doorway with the deliberate smallness of someone who has spent a lot of time watching other people startle and does not intend to contribute to the mess. He wore a good winter jacket that had been rubbed clean along the zipper by habit, and a hat you could buy anywhere. He didn't take the hat off. His face at first glance was entirely reasonable. Practical mouth, a tan that didn't belong to winter, eyes that knew more days than they displayed. Evening, he said, the word pressed flat to take the shine off it. The dogs froze, then did the thing I will replay when I need to remember how close I came. They stepped backward, not barking, not growling, just easing themselves out of a picture they didn't want to be in. Duke looked at me once, as if to say there are rules we understand, and this man doesn't follow them. Front door's that way, I said, because sometimes you can reorder a room with grammar. I tried, he said. He did not look at it. Screen's loose. I followed stupidly with my eyes. The mesh at the back door lifted in a corner. The little tabs bent with a fingernail. The dirty thumbprint in the aluminum channel that said in 3 dark ovals you were asleep, and I was not. Do you want money? I asked. The sentence felt like a coat your mother makes you wear. Practical, ugly, insufficient to the weather. He looked past me at the wood stove, at the neat pile of split logs like loaves, the neat little ash bucket. He had the air of a man taking inventory for a move. No, he said, I don't think so. Then what? I asked, already knowing the answer was not a noun. He held up something that wasn't a gun, and frightened me more. A roll of white nylon cord, neat as bread. In his winter jacket, it looked like he had written the word procedure on his body and decided to let me read it. We're going to go for a drive, he said. Mild. Not unkind. You're going to help me keep the night on schedule. My mouth was full of a dozen sentences that all started with please and ended with nothing. I don't think I will, I tried, and the try came out thinner than I meant. He stepped sideways into the kitchen light the way a cat corrects its course to avoid the broom. Another shape became true. A short, black-handled knife. Not large, not theatrical, ugly with purpose. The kind of thing you keep in a tackle box to cut line and find its other uses when you need them. He did not point it. He simply let it exist between us, a third party in the conversation. Shoes, he said. Why me? I said, because if you can make a man tell a story sometimes, he will discover he is the villain in it and leave out of embarrassment. You were here, he said, and because you will follow directions. I was going to prove him wrong. And then I looked at the dogs and they looked at me, and their ears went back flat, and all that flowed through my head was alive, is a direction too. There's a moment where you divide yourself into 2 people, the one who lives inside the yes and the one who will not shut up about the no. I put on my boots, with the clever part of me screaming. I put on the Myers parka because outside was knives. I took my bag and he shook his head, and I set it down because for reasons I couldn't name, the idea of having chapstick in my pocket seemed suddenly obscene. Keys, he said, but gently, like a librarian asking you to put the book back where you found it. I took them from the hook by the door. He had a hand out for them. He did not grab. Something ugly brushed my ribs then, because his stillness, his neatness, his lack of drama was the thing you adopt when theater would make you shake. We walked out through the mudroom into air that cracked. Every star was performing. The wind was both hands on my cheeks. The snow made that squeak it only makes when it has to kill you a little to carry your weight. He followed me down the shoveled path to the Myers' old Ford. He knew the car from the shape of the key. He got in the driver's side. Not because he doubts me, his face said. Because he has a system, and I am buckle 14 in the series. I looked toward the road. He noticed that too. "There's no one coming," he said with a weird kind of assurance, like a neighbor advising you on when to take the trash out so the wind won't steal the lids. He started the engine and made a note of the fuel situation with his eyes. He adjusted the seat like a man borrowing a tool for a few minutes. When he pulled onto the road, he did it the way the wind does, without apology. He didn't speak for the first 50 yards, and that silence was the first thing that knelt on my chest. I tried to swallow my pulse. We passed the mailbox with the faded Myers, and I thought absurdly of leaving a note in there like a child to Santa. "Please, find me. I've been good." "You ever read maps?" he asked at last, as if we were about to take a friendly hike. "I can," I said. "Good," he said. "This part never had proper signs." He turned left where I would have turned right, and I felt my heart put a hand on the emergency brake. Back roads. People forget them. People is a word you learn to hate in a hurry. I made what I hoped looked like an exhale. "Where are we going?" I said. "Up," he said, and the way he said it made up sound like the past tense of a verb I didn't want to conjugate. He drove like this was his job. Hands at 10 and 2, a glance to the side mirror revised every 13 seconds. The gas feathered, not stepped on. He kept us 5 below the speed limit, as if we had all the time in the world and he had measured it and knew. "Why me?" I said again, because the brain has a loop it likes when it's breaking. He considered being annoyed. Then he set that down and put on a kinder thing, like a coach. "Because your lights were on," he said. "Because you made it easy. People make things easy when they want to be left alone. There's a thing that happens when terror has exhausted itself. A kind of competence arrives from the place where you keep your lists." I inventoried. Pockets, lip balm left behind. Phone, the Myers didn't have service out here. Mine was in my bag in the kitchen like a useless organ. House. The dogs, the wood stove, the note I'd left on the counter with the time I fed them. Car, scraper, mittens, blanket, and the ugly heavy feeling of rolling toward an unknown that had decided on me. He kept his right hand near the gear shift, with one finger resting along the plastic in a way that said, "I have patience, but also the engine is mine," on the floor by his feet. A hard-sided plastic toolbox the size of a bread loaf thumped gently around corners. I caught the corner of a roll of gray tape poking out of it. He caught my eyes catching it. He did not smile. His face arranged itself into neutral. He asked lightly what I did for work. I told him I was between things, because that's honest for a gig economy darling who sometimes walks other people's dogs. He asked what I planned to do, and I told him I was taking classes in the spring, and he said, "What kind?" And I said, "Accounting," because it sounded sturdy, and he nodded the way men nod when you show you know what can be counted and what can't. The road swung us left past a sign with bullet holes declaring Rampart Range, and my stomach announced to me that it knew a little history. I thought of the case the papers still mention when there's nothing else to say. I thought of a child with a last name that is an altar in town. I thought of fingerprints on a screen, and my hands went cold under my gloves. He noticed my noticing. He always noticed the noticing. "You're thinking," he said, pleasant as a church usher who recognizes you and chooses not to know you. "You could let me go," I said, and the sanity of it almost made me laugh. You could stop the car right here and let me walk back, and you could be a person who did that once and knew what that felt like." He considered it. Really considered it. I watched the idea cross his face like a small weather system, pressure shifting, a cloud thinking about dropping a little snow. He didn't say no. He just put the turn signal on for no reason and turned it off again like a man who likes to keep the machine honest. "I could," he said, "but I'm keeping count." "Of what?" I asked, buying time with syllables. "Finishes," he said, and my hands closed around themselves to keep from flying at him. We climbed. The trees came nearer, their flocked arms bowing a little under the weight of last week's story. We slid into a deeper quiet, one with teeth. He turned off the main road and onto a 2-track that had seen more deer than trucks. The snow here sulked, unplowed, rutted, doing that mean thing it does when it looks smooth and has nothing but traps underneath. The Ford rattled its opinion. Something in the toolbox clinked approval. "You should wear your seatbelt," I said, because I wanted any sentence that sounded like authority to come out of my mouth. "I'm trained," he said, which was an answer to a better question. He pulled into a turnout that was not a turnout so much as a place where some men years ago had decided to drink beer and stare at town lights until they remembered why they went home. He cut the engine. The sudden absence of the heater noise was a removal of forgiveness. He put his gloved hands in his lap and looked at the windshield, at the inversion layer holding the city like a sleeping animal. Then he looked at me and said, "Exactly the way he might ask it about a grocery aisle. Hands!" "No," I said. Softer than I meant, but still no. He let the refusal sit on the dashboard like a cup you didn't ask for. He watched it. He does not force prematurely, I told the loudest part of me. He sequences. "You won't be hurt if you behave," he said. But he said it like a man reading store policy, not promising a thing at all. "What does behave mean?" I asked. "It means you won't add steps," he said. I thought, he loves lists. I thought, he loves it when things can be done in 6 steps instead of 8. "Tell me the steps," I said. And he did. The small ones: seatbelt off, hands, wrap, tape, walk, trunk, drive. He said them exactly the way he would have said open, measure, pour, stir. The word trunk still had time to negotiate its future. If I had let my breath out, it would have been a scream. "What's my name?" I asked. He tilted his head like a bird. "I don't know it," he said, and he didn't. Not even to pretend. I was an object in a column, a piece of inventory that had not been mislabeled because it did not deserve a label. "If you don't know my name," I said, "you'll count me wrong." He smiled then, small and almost affectionate, the way you look at a child who sounds clever and you intend to leave a little window cracked for them if they figure out what a window is. "No," he said, "I'm very good at counting." He reached for the toolbox. That was the sound I will hear under fireworks in July for the rest of my life. The little plastic click of the cheap latch. I was already moving. Fury is so useful when you've been very polite for too long. I went sideways, not out, because the door was next to his right knee and the knife's little breath was right there, and I am not a liar about my own speed. But toward him. He expected run. He didn't expect lean. I put my shoulder into the side of his jaw, and he made a sound of surprise that would have been funny if it weren't holding my life by the throat. He was trained. He turned the sound into a grip on my coat, his left hand going to the meat of my upper arm with a clamp that had already practiced on other people. He let the knife fall into the console like a gentleman. His right hand found the nylon. My elbow found his ribs. Not hard enough. He didn't yelp. He didn't curse. He just breathed that long, patient breath men breathe when they have decided the next part is going to be messy, and they have made their peace with bleach. "Stop," he said. Calm. Not unkind. "Make me," I said, which was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've done, and it tasted like battery acid in my mouth. He did not hit me. He did not even really pull. He adjusted the room, the way you might move a chair no one is using so you don't stub your toe later. He let my flailing burn itself down to a pilot light, and in that distracted, exhausted second, he looped the nylon around my wrists, twice, 3 times, a neat tuck, a tug. The friction burned a little. My hands went from mine to his in a second I'd like back. "Good," he said, And if I ever tattoo a word on the inside of my eyelids so that I never hear it as anything but the sound that saved me, it will be that one, because I decided to hate it, and the hatred saw me through. He took the tape next. He looked at my face exactly long enough to memorize it, not as a man memorizes a woman he intends to kiss, but as a contractor measures a doorframe. He held the tape up. "Quiet," he said. "Please," I said. And then I said the thing that had been sitting in the back of my mouth like a sharp penny. "There's a patrol car that comes up here around this time. They sit at the overlook. I bring the dogs. I know their pattern." The tape sat there in his hand, breathing. He looked at the overlook. He looked at the road. He looked at me, into me, in that way men do when they put their thumb on a scale. He liked schedules. He liked routes. He liked regular. He liked fixed. He did not like maybes unless they were his. "It's a holiday weekend," he said. "They're running I-25. "They like the quiet," I said. "They drink thermos coffee and talk about elk and how the air makes their teeth hurt." He watched the road with one eye and me with the other, and all of the night with his skin. He didn't move for 7 counts. I counted. "What are their names?" he asked, and my heart tried to crawl out under the dashboard and hide. "I don't know," I said, which was true and which could have killed me. "They wave. I wave. The dogs pee. They say, 'How's it?' and I say, 'How it is,' and then I go home." But they come about now, between 12:30 and 1. He glanced at the dash clock. He had the kind of brain that keeps track of time as if it owes him money. 12:32. I saw his mouth take his own scold. He didn't like miscalculations. "Then we'll go," he said, and the relief I felt is a shame I will let live in its own shed. He edged the car out of the little turnout like a crippled animal backing out of a snare and nosed us into the rutted 2-track again. The Ford whined its objections. My hands hurt with resolve. I moved them, small movements, testing the knot where he couldn't see. He did see. He approved. It looked like approval. He liked motion that could be predicted. He liked to watch the math work. He turned right at a fork I wouldn't have noticed in daylight. The trees closed ranks, and the sky peeled back to a thin strip. He drove with small corrections, barely touching the wheel, like a man playing an instrument that doesn't quite belong to him but likes him anyway. The cold was inside the car now, a participant. I put my bound hands under my thighs and sat on them as if I could incubate heat and hatch courage. "Don't be clever," he said, as if he'd practiced the sentence and was pleased to use it. "I'm not," I said, and then, "I am always clever." And he laughed a little, which made his shoulders settle, which gave my hands a millimeter, which gave me a plan as poor and necessary as a starving person filling their pockets with rolls from the church supper. We came out of the trees onto a straight run with a drop to the right where the land forgot itself. Down there, the town smeared orange over its own mistakes. Up here, the road held us tight. He slowed. A light flickered in the rear view. A pale wink in the far distance, not blue-red, not urgent. A civilian night, careless and curious. "They'll see your lights from the overlook," I said, making myself a collaborator because it would keep me alive long enough to betray him better. "Keep left. There's a cut-through to the service road." "You know it," he said, pleased, which is how you make a man underestimate the kind of person who keeps the soup labels all facing front. We dipped into the cut. The Ford bucked once. A chain across a track glinted quick and was gone. The service road ran straight and hard along the back of a hill with a half-blown cattle fence as a handrail. The tires hissed over hardpack. He watched the mirror. He watched me. The loop on my right wrist loosened. It's a ridiculous thing to feel. The patience of nylon. If you do it one friendlier degree at a time, it doesn't report you. I breathed shallow and moved at the pace of tree growth. "You work alone?" I asked, because now felt like the time to make him say I a lot. "Always," he said. "People spoil things. People make you messy," I said, and he half smiled, pleased by the echo. "People talk," he corrected. "You can count on less when there are more." He turned off the service road and onto gravel, with the affirmation in his shoulders of a man who has found his right chair. Ahead, no structure. Just a clump of trees bruising the skyline and an old metal cattle gate that looked like it had been waiting specifically for him to arrive. He stopped in front of it. He let the engine idle. He listened to the night the way a home cook listens to a crowded kitchen. He decided it was his. "Now," he said. and it sounded so much like prayer I almost bowed. He killed the engine. The quiet was ridiculous. He turned his head until his hat brim pointed down the road like a compass needle. He breathed once, twice, a third time. He opened his door and the car light came on, the cheap, warm dome that always looks a little like kindness even when it's not. He stood up into it. He looked, for a second, weirdly ordinary, just a man who had stopped to adjust a gate. He reached into the toolbox and took out the tape again. He leaned down into the cab, and the little circle of light made a halo on his hair that made me want to scream for the absurdity of it. "Quiet," he said again, and I heard myself say, "Okay," in a voice I remember from being 7. I leaned toward him like I was offering him the thing he wanted, and I was, my face. He reached, and I reached, and that's where I made the first decision my body didn't vote against. I bit the edge of the tape roll and pulled like a dog winning a tug-of-war. It came away in my teeth with that angry squeal tape makes when it realizes it is about to be asked to participate in a moral act. He jerked. The roll slipped. I spat it into the footwell and stomped it with my heel. He grabbed my ankle. I kicked his wrist. The tape went skittering under the seat. He did not swear at me. He did not explain how this was uncooperative. He did the heavy thing he had been saving. He reached across me with his left arm, pinned me with the forearm that had a string of tiny freckles like spilled pepper, pulled my body into a kiss with the passenger seat. "You are beginning to add steps," he said, breath steady. I could smell the clean of his jacket sleeve, the ghost of bleach, the iron in him. He was careful with pressure. I would not bruise in ways people could see. That made me furious. I made an ugly sound into his sleeve and pretended it was a laugh. He eased the nylon with his thumb, testing the knot's conscience. It held. For now. "Tell me a story," I said, the sentence coming from some mean part of me that wanted something to die at my hands, even if it was just silence. He paused. It was his turn to consider how to steal time. "A man comes home," he said after a measured second, "and the yard is too quiet. The lights aren't on. The room has the wrong shape." He said it like he was telling a child why the dog doesn't come back. He knows already, before he opens any door, that a thing has happened that will change what the rooms are called. "What are they called?" I asked, because I know how stories work. You pull them to places the tellers don't expect, and the seams show. "Evidence," he said. "They're called evidence." That's when the light came around the curve behind us, a glaze on the fence wire, a slow white the color of sighs, and he took his arm off my body the way a gentleman removes his hat when a lady enters a room. Headlights. Not a patrol car. A pickup with an extension ladder in the back and a tired man behind the wheel, his face lit by a single phone glow. He slowed a skeptical speed. He saw our car, the open gate, the night. He did the math you do when you want nothing to be your problem tonight. He went a little faster. "Help!" I said, and I don't know if it left my mouth or only lived in the weird electricity between headlight and eyes. The pickup hesitated, a fish tasting a hook. It stopped. My heart bit me. The man leaned across the bench seat and rolled down the passenger window a polite inch. "Y'all all right?" he called into the impossible menu of possibilities. My driver smiled into the general area of man. He had a precise smile for each category of witness. This one said neighbor. "All good," he called back, conversational. "Gate sticky." "Want a hand?" the man called, because Colorado is a place where people still display the virtue that will get them killed if they meet the wrong romance. "That's kind," my driver said, "but we've got it." And his hand on my arm tightened, not in threat, in caution. Don't catch his eye. Don't make him part of either of our stories. I made eye contact anyway. The pickup man's face flinched. He saw my bound hands in the pale dome light. He didn't parse. He experienced a human error in the scene. "Ma'am," he said, his voice lurching from politeness to alarm in a heartbeat. "You okay there?" My driver's smile settled into something like resignation. He let go of me like a man who has realized the recipe says bake for 30, and he has already baked 32, and the cake is what the cake is. He stood up. He closed my door the last 2 inches with the soft hand of a man who doesn't slam. He turned to the pickup and put his hands where men like them best. Out, visible, palms. "Sir?" he said gently, and This is how I will tell it forever. He apologized with his eyes for what comes next, the way a tornado apologizes to a barn. The pickup man went all the way out of the truck with a speed that suggested he had once won something for this. He got both boots on the ground and both hands on a phone and both eyes on my face, and his chest lifted in a way that means we are bigger whether we are or not. He said my favorite sentence in a voice that would fill a church hall. Leave her. My driver's face did nothing. That might be the truest thing about him. He stepped backward, small, precise. He very nearly smiled. He did that thing men do when they assess exactly how many seconds they can spend handling the situation without letting the situation handle them. He moved toward the gate, and then the ladder in the bed of the pickup slid forward onto the cab with a noise like a metal god deciding to sneeze. And for exactly half a breath, everyone looked at the ladder. And that was the moment my right wrist got free. Do you know how loud nylon sounds when it gives? Like forgiveness cracking. Like a knuckle finally stretched. I brought the coil with me because I had learned something about him already. Neatness is holy to him. I wanted to make a mess he couldn't stand. I threw the coil at his chest. It hit and fell, and that was not the point. The point was his hand moved to pick it up without permission from his brain. And the pickup man saw that, and the pickup man moved, and I moved, and the gate did the one noble thing gates do when it matters. It got in the way. I ran. Not far. Where? To whom? Into the idea of town. I ran to the front of the pickup and planted my palms on the warm hood and put my face into the leftover sun of the engine the way you press your cheek to an animal to let it know you need help from both of you. Please, I said, and the pickup man, bless the weary saint of jobs that make your knuckles ache, got his entire body between mine and the other man, and he said 3 words that changed the shape of the road. Call it in. My driver did not run. He stepped back and put his hands on top of his head as if someone had suggested it politely. He looked at me and expression did not happen. He watched my mouth say no to him with more capacity than it had ever had, and he made a small mental note the way you jot down how long pasta needs in salted water. By the time a county cruiser slid into the cut with its lights writing red syllables on the trees, my wrists were raw, and my world had come back a half inch at a time out of the tunnel it had shrunk into. The deputy saw the tape roll under the seat, saw the nylon like a dead snake, saw my face, which I have learned is very good at telling men who think they're trained to tell whether women are lying, that there are nights they do not have the width to interpret. Ma'am, he said, and I am not a ma'am, but I wanted to be his anything. He looked at my driver, and I watched his face do a thing I have watched men do when they look at a man who looks like a version of themselves, and they cannot hate him properly because they agree on what style is. He did the only graceful thing left. He became procedure. He moved the man into light. He made the words. He let other cars bring other witnesses. He did not give me a blanket because we were not inside yet, but he put his body in my wind. My driver, in cuffs, finally met my eyes. He gave me a look that felt somehow more intimate than anything else he'd offered me. Not rage, not plea. Assessment, affection's dry cousin. You made it complicated, his look said. I thought you would value tidy. He looked away. He began for the first time to look small. They put me in the front of the cruiser, not the back. A kindness I clocked and then put down because clocking kindnesses while your hands are vibrating is like trying to fold laundry during a house fire. The deputy, Parker, his badge said in a font that looked very ready to be read, asked if I was hurt. My wrists stung, and a spot on my shoulder would flower later into a bruise I carried to bed like an ugly corsage. I'm all right, I said, and then, because truth is a better blanket than lies in weather like this, I'm scared. You're here, he said, and you told me early. He meant you made a noise when there were still men awake to hear it. The pickup man, he told us his name, but in my head it is the latter saint, stood with his arms crossed, not trying to be a hero, just taking up space in a way that made the night choose sides. The gate kept being a gate like that was its contribution to the narrative. My driver said very little. He told the county what men like him say. We were going to fix a gate. We met on the road. She was crying, so I pulled over. The cord was for the gate, the tape was for the gate, the knife was for the cord. The night was for the kind of men who are useful. He didn't lie well. He lied tidily. Tidiness is a tone. At the station, the fluorescent lights made me a paler thing, and my face tried to become my mother's, and I pressed my mouth together until it learned how to be my own again. They sat me in a room with a clock that did a slow, obvious second hand, and a table you could hose off if you had to. Detective Waller came in with a legal pad that had already collected 3 stories today, and would collect mine whether or not I participated. He was kind in the way of Colorado cops I have known, competent first, then human, in a ratio that made me grateful. "Walk me through it from your lights going on," he said. I did. He did not interrupt me except to ask where the dogs had gone and to mark the moment where I had asked why me. He liked my numbers man hypothesis. He liked my use of sequence. He wrote tidy and circled it once. He asked me to say exactly what my driver had said when I told him about the patrol schedule. He asked what time the clock in the car had read. He asked whether the man smiled with his mouth or his eyes. He asked me whether I noticed anything unusual about the car, a smell, a stain, a rattle. "Bleach," I said, "and something under his seat that made a square sound." He nodded without moving anything on his face and made, on the pad, a small square. "Did he tell you his name?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, he didn't use names." "Did he seem proud?" Waller asked. "It wasn't mockery. It was cataloging." "Not proud," I said, and heard myself choosing the word like it mattered. "Finished." He nodded, as if I had answered a multiple choice correctly. "You didn't drink anything," he offered, he added. "Good." "I didn't have my chapstick," I said, helpless and suddenly furious at the wind, the dogs, the soup, the way the word trunk can make you smaller than your skin. He put his pen down. He said my name gently and gave me the human part. "You did what people do to live," he said. "You made sound. You made time. You made a mess. You don't have to be neat to be good." They photographed my wrists. The camera clicked like an apology. The evidence tech, a woman with coffee on her breath and onion in her smile, asked me if I wanted to hold still or if I needed to move, and I almost cried because she asked. They let me wash my hands. Hot water said here in a language I understood. I looked into the mirror over the sink and practiced my face and met a person I would recognize anywhere now. The one who did not die and does not know yet what to do with the fact. Outside the room, the station moved with the quiet flurry that means someone's name just got written on the big whiteboard. I heard a fax machine sing a little dirge. I heard keys jingle with the exact smallness of a man who believes in not waking sleeping paperwork. Detective Waller came back in and sat in a different chair, the one the offenders sit in across from me, as if to show me he had no intention of sharing furniture with the man with the cord. "He's not ours for the first time tonight," Waller said. "He's been some department's problem in at least 3 states. We've told them. They're hungry." "What will happen to him?" I asked. "We'll start here," he said. He tapped the word attempted on his pad. "We'll let the rest climb on." "He said he keeps count," I said, and some shame spilled out and would not stand back up. I gave him a number. Waller picked up the word and put it in his pocket without letting it bleed on the desk. "We've seen his kind," he said. "Some of them write letters. Some of them keep books. The books aren't real. The letters aren't either. The people are." "Are there?" I tried to say others, tried to say like me, tried to ask for a roll call of the living without putting corpses' names in my mouth. He did me the kindness of pretending he didn't hear the question the way I asked it. "We'll look," he said. "We have a section of Colorado that looks like him. Black Forest, Rampart Range, out east to the prairie if you draw the right lines. We'll look where he looked." "Tell me when it's safe to go home," I said. He made that face good men make when the truthful answer is inconvenient. "Now," he said, "with company, with a deputy in the driveway while you let the dogs out, with all the lights on this time." They did that for me. Parker, my wind wall, and a second deputy drove me back up into the part of the county that doesn't believe you until you prove you can start a fire in wet wood. They went to the door with me. Sable and Duke did their guard dog note, then recognized me and wagged that big, body-shaking wag that makes you think the world puts some joy aside every day, just in case you need it. The deputies checked the windows and wrote small pencil notes on the doorframe for the detective, like carpenters who want a foreman to admire their joints. I stood in the kitchen where the night had become a sentence and warmed my hands over the wood stove, while Sable leaned her two great heads against my thigh. I could not decide between soup or whiskey, or the little bottle of vanilla I wanted to drink, because it had the word extract on it, and I felt, somehow, like drain cleaner might make me into the kind of person who doesn't run. Finish. I made soup. I put 2 bowls on the floor, and the dogs ate like I had done the clever version of God's work. I sat at the table and stared at the dark glass and waited very quietly for morning to put its mouth on the horizon. It came. It always does. It came slow and numb, and it made the pines look like lungs again. The dogs asked for outside, and this time I went with them, and the gate across the back field stayed a gate, and the wind just made its small talk. I sat on the back step and waited for the wood to ask to be split, and thought about the way his face had not changed when the cuffs came out, the way he had looked not at me but into me, looking for the place the knot would leave a line. Detective Waller called at 11. "We've got a lot," he said. "We'll need your statement once more at length, and then we'll let the attorneys turn your verbs into their nouns." "What's his name?" I asked. It felt like consenting to a marriage when you don't want to, like signing a document without reading the part where they tell you how long you have to grieve. "I'll tell you at the end," he said, and I loved him for saving that for me, like a bad present you refuse to open in public. Courtrooms are rooms where wood works very hard to forgive people. The benches say sit, the doors say hush, the clerk says all rise, and you do. I wore a sweater my mother says is flattering because she believes a collarbone can persuade a jury. The DA told me their plan like a coach. Don't let the defense lawyer put your memory on trial. Keep your eye an eye. If a question is 2 questions, refuse to birth the second one. They had me tell it again. The room held the story without spilling it. The DA walked me to the moments where it mattered. The screen, the dogs, the inventory, the word trunk. He let the latter saint tell his part. He let Parker say the words that make paper heavy. Zip ties, nylon, tape, knife, toolbox. Evidence laid itself down like wood planks. We crossed the creek in our shoes. The defense asked me if I'd been drinking. I said no, with a mouth that was better at the word now, and the defense lawyer flinched a little because sometimes no is martial art. He asked whether I had screamed. I said I had not. That I had chosen noise when noise would bring help, and chosen quiet when quiet would make him listen. He asked whether the tape had touched me, whether the knife had kissed skin, whether we had actually begun to drive to a second location. And the DA objected to the phrasing, and the judge told the defense to knock it off, and I felt like 20 people had picked me up and put me down on the safe side of a fence. He sat over there, in a suit that made him look like the kind of man who sells you a refrigerator in a town where you know the word of mouth. He had been turned into a client, and clients learn exactly how to look at ceilings. He smiled once, small, for himself. He did not look at me, not properly. He looked at my wrists the way a carpenter glances at a joint he doesn't like. The newspapers did their newspapers. Black Forest woman escapes kidnap attempt. Deputies interrupt possible abduction in Rampart Range. A columnist wrote about how the county had seen horror before and had survived it, and I wanted to tear the column out and tape it to my fridge and then set the fridge on fire because survival is not a thing you do once. It's a project that keeps requiring your signature. Detective Waller brought me coffee in a styrofoam cup with your safe written on it in Sharpie like a joke, and I kept the cup for too long. They cataloged what was in his car with the slow, joyless care of men who have been asked to tell the truth with gloves on. A map with 3 penciled loops, receipts from hardware stores that say nothing and everything, a ring of keys with 1 orphan whose lock they'll find a year from now in a storage unit and then wish they hadn't opened. In the trunk, the expected things, and the things that make you sit down because finding them knocks your breath out. In the glove box, folded paper with small notes like a man keeping score, not for the police but for himself. Waller didn't show me photographs, bless him. He told me the nouns in a low voice that didn't make them bigger than they had a right to be. He did tell me the sentence that finally put a little clean air in my lungs. We can put him where he can't drive again. A month later, in a different room with less wood and more tile, he stood while the judge said exactly what he could do to a man like that based on the charges we had, and it was not everything, and it was more than nothing. The judge sounded tired, a good tired, like work done properly. The DA squeezed my hand in that courtroom way that acknowledges public space. The latter saint nodded at me from the back row and tipped 2 fingers off an imaginary hat. Detective Waller stood in the aisle and took no credit. My driver leaned to whisper to his attorney, and for a second the words learned nothing ran through my head like rats. Then he looked up and our eyes collided, and this time his look was very nearly human. Irritation, like a man whose route to work has been permanently detoured and who will blame a barricade every day for the rest of his life. People ask me why I didn't scream. I tell them I did. I said help into a headlight beam, and a man heard, and a deputy heard, and a county heard, and a judge heard, and my wrists hear it still when they stop hurting long enough to remember English. People ask if I forgive him. I ask them why forgiveness is the soup people serve when they don't want to stay for the main course. People ask if I dream about the trunk. I say yes, but less now. I dream about the dogs and soup, and a kind of cold that tried to make me small and failed. I dream about ladders and how the dumb luck of gravity can be a better friend than courage. When I drive home now, I check my mirrors like a driving instructor lives in my back seat. I count guardrails without writing the numbers down. I leave my porch light on and do not apologize to the planet for the energy bill. I have a gate across my back field now, and it does the normal work of a gate in a normal county, and I bless it when I go out to meet it. The dogs, my dogs now. The Myers moved, and I said I'll take the Malamutes, because I wanted to be the person who could sleep so hard they dream and their paws twitch, and it feels like the earth has forgiven me for learning what it costs to be here. When the detective finally said the name, he did it in a small office with paperwork trying to escape its clipboards. He told me the whole of it, what other places suspected, how letters arrive at sheriff's offices from people who have nothing but time and reputations to polish, how men who keep counts can't stop polishing. He said the number he had probably told someone once. He said claim the way you say a swear in front of a child, softening it so it isn't a game they'll use against you later. I wrote the name down on the back of a grocery list. I folded it 3 times. I put it in the drawer next to the dog leashes. I will keep it there. My name goes on my door, not his. How am I doing? Well, I kept the dogs, learned the gate squeaks by heart, and I still leave the porch light on. Killer reveal, Robert Charles Browne. Robert Charles Browne, born 1952, is a convicted murderer and suspected serial killer tied to Colorado Springs. He pleaded guilty to the 1991 kidnapping and murder of 13-year-old Heather Dawn Church, and later to the 1987 murder of Rocio Sperry. While only 2 murders are confirmed, Browne sent cryptic letters to authorities claiming responsibility for around 48 to 49 killings across multiple states dating back to 1970. He is serving life without parole in Colorado.